the film Mask, you know that Cher turns in a stunning performance as the mother who's a flamboyant California biker with an affinity for drugs, who bravely raises her little son Rocky.
When people think of Rocky Dennis, they think of the movie Mask. They remember the story of a courageous boy and his devoted mother who conquered impossible odds. But that picture-perfect narrative is a carefully constructed fantasy. The real mystery of Rocky Dennis isn't just about his life, but about his ending. His own mother, Rusty, held the key to this secret for years, only to reveal it before her own life concluded. The truth she exposed is a shocking, unsettling story that Hollywood would never have the courage to tell. Crafting the mask. The thing nobody tells you is how powerful that myth became. When Mask hit theaters in 1985, the legend of Rocky was sealed in cinematic history. The film, starring Cher as his mother Rusty and Eric Stoltz as Rocky, was a massive success. Cher's portrayal of a fierce, unconventional biker mom who would move heaven and earth for her son earned her the Best Actress award at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival. The movie didn't stop there. It also snagged an Academy Award for Best Makeup, a testament to the incredible effort taken to respectfully recreate Rocky's unique appearance. This wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural event. TV specials painted Rocky as a miracle child. Magazine articles celebrated Rusty as a fearless mother who gave her son a life doctors claimed was impossible. What many overlooked was that this was a story told through the soft focus lens of Hollywood. It smoothed out the rough edges and polished the difficult truths. In the film, Rocky is a witty, kind-hearted teenager who navigates high school, falls in love, and earns the respect of his peers. His mother is a whirlwind of leather jackets and tough love, but her devotion is never in question. Their life is portrayed as a struggle, yes, but one that is ultimately triumphant and heartwarming. The movie's emotional climax shows Rocky passing away peacefully in his sleep, with his mother finding him the next morning, a heartbreaking but gentle end to an inspiring life. This version of events was easy to digest, safe to share, and profoundly moving. For years, Rusty herself remained mostly silent on the inaccuracies. She let the myths grow, rarely correcting the way Hollywood chose to tell her son's story. Perhaps she understood that people needed a hero, or maybe she just didn't have the heart to tear down the hopeful monument that had been built in her son's name. To the world, she was the wild but loving mom who gave her boy a life that defied all medical predictions. That was enough for people. But behind that public silence, Rusty carried a much heavier, more complicated truth. She lived through the nights of unimaginable pain that were never shown on screen. She knew the moments of pure chaos and heartbreak that no magazine article ever printed. And once her truth finally came out, there was no way to look at the story of Rocky Dennis the same way ever again. The beautiful myth was about to be shattered by a brutal reality, more than just a different face. While the movie showed a boy who won over his classmates with charm, the reality of Rocky's childhood was far more of a battle. Born on December 4th, 1961, Roy L. Rocky Dennis at first seemed like any other healthy baby. But by the age of 2, the first signs appeared. X-rays at UCLA revealed strange calcium deposits in his skull. The diagnosis was craniodiaphyseal dysplasia, an incredibly rare genetic disorder that causes the bones of the skull to grow uncontrollably. It's so rare, in fact, that fewer than 20 cases have ever been documented in medical history. Doctors gave it the grim nickname lionitis, because of the way the bone growth would enlarge and distort facial features, almost resembling a lion's mane. The prognosis was beyond devastating. Doctors told Rusty that the ever-thickening bone would put immense pressure on Rocky's brain and cranial nerves. They predicted he would lose his eyesight, then his hearing, and that the pressure would become so intense it would eventually end his life. Their most optimistic prediction? He wouldn't live to see his 7th birthday. To say this was a heavy burden is an understatement. Most parents are planning for first steps and first words. Rusty was being told to plan for her son's funeral, but she refused. She was determined that his life, however short, would be a life, not just a waiting game. School was a battlefield. While Mask shows a relatively quick acceptance, the real experience was a daily grind of stares, whispers, and cruel taunts. What the movie couldn't possibly convey was the sheer, relentless physical pain Rocky endured. The condition caused excruciating headaches, powerful enough to leave him bedridden for days. His vision was severely impaired, making simple classroom activities a monumental effort. Yet, he pushed through, developing a sharp wit and a dark sense of humor as a defense mechanism. He once told a new doctor, "I look at it this way. A good friend of mine is blind, and I can see. So I'm not that bad off, am I?" And then there was his home life. Cher's portrayal of Rusty was charismatic, but the reality was infinitely more chaotic. Rusty was deeply involved in the biker subculture and struggled with an addiction to illicit substances. Their home was a revolving door of bikers, parties, and instability. While her love for Rocky was the one constant, the environment was anything but stable. Social workers often questioned her fitness as a parent, and she was in and out of trouble with the law. This wasn't the sanitized rock and roll lifestyle of the movie. It was a gritty, often frightening existence for a child who was already fighting a war inside his own body. The film touched on this, but it never showed the true depth of the darkness they both had to navigate. The life he lived was hard, but the end was even harder. What really happened to Rocky's body? The most beloved and most misleading part of the movie, Mask, is its ending. The film presents a tender, albeit heartbreaking, conclusion. Rocky passes away in his sleep from the immense pressure on his brain, and Rusty finds him the next morning, cradling him one last time. It's a scene designed to bring audiences to tears, offering a sense of peaceful closure. The thing is, it never happened that way. For decades, Rusty Dennis carried the weight of a far more devastating truth, a secret she finally revealed in the years before her own passing. The reality of her son's final moments was a scenario that was, in its own way, terrifying. Rocky Dennis passed away on October 4th, 1978. He was only 16 years old, but his mother was not with him. On that fateful day, Rusty was not at home. She had been dealing with her own legal troubles, a consequence of the chaotic lifestyle she led. She wasn't by his bedside, and there was no gentle farewell. The news of her son's passing reached her through a cold, impersonal phone call. For a mother whose entire identity was wrapped up in being her son's protector, this absence was a source of unimaginable pain and guilt that haunted her for the rest of her life. The Hollywood myth of a perfect goodbye was a comforting lie that masked a much harsher, lonelier end. But that wasn't the only secret Rusty revealed. The second part of the mystery is what happened after Rocky was gone. The movie implies a traditional burial, a place where friends and family could visit and leave mementos. Again, the truth is something else entirely, something many might find shocking. Rusty made the incredibly difficult decision to donate her son's body to the UCLA Medical Center. She did this so that researchers could study his remains and learn more about the ultra-rare condition that took his life. His body was not laid to rest. Instead, it became a crucial part of medical history. For years, scientists and medical students studied his skull and genetic material. Rocky's case provided invaluable data that helped doctors better understand craniodiaphyseal dysplasia. His short, painful life contributed to a body of knowledge that could potentially help others in the future. His legacy wasn't just one of inspiration and courage, it was also one of scientific contribution. This part of the story, the cold clinical reality of a boy becoming a medical specimen, is rarely spoken of. It's a jarring truth that stands in stark contrast to the warm, sentimental narrative sold to the world. Her confession rewrote his entire legacy, but why did she finally speak? The myth versus the man. After decades of letting the Hollywood version of her son's life define him, why did Rusty Dennis finally decide to set the record straight? For years, she had let the myth of Mask live on. Cher's fierce portrayal of her, the uplifting message, the idea of a mother's boundless love conquering everything. But behind that glow was something darker, heavier, and far more real. As Rusty aged and began facing her own mortality, it seems the truth she'd kept buried started clawing its way out. The story she'd allowed to take over her son's memory was comforting, yes, but it wasn't real. And when she passed away in 2006, She made sure that before she left this world, the real story, the raw, unfiltered version, was finally told. She didn't do it out of bitterness or to attack the film that made Rocky famous. She did it to reclaim her son, to give him back his identity, stripped of the movie magic and Hollywood polishing. The boy she raised wasn't a saint or a symbol. He was a human being, a messy, complicated, beautiful soul who lived with pain and humor and strength that couldn't be scripted. Rusty wanted the world to remember that version of Rocky, the one that Hollywood didn't know how to handle. One of her biggest revelations was that she wasn't actually there when he passed away. For decades, fans believed she had held his hand in his final moments, whispering comfort and courage. But the truth, as she later confessed, was that she wasn't in the room. For many, that confession shattered the legend. But for Rusty, it was liberation. It was her way of saying, I wasn't perfect, and neither was he. And that's okay. That admission made their story more human than ever, because life isn't a perfectly edited movie. It's messy. It's full of mistakes, guilt, and things we wish we could do over. In telling the truth, Rusty didn't weaken the story. She made it stronger. The myth of the perfect warrior mom dissolved, revealing a mother who was flawed, scared, and sometimes lost. And that somehow made her courage even greater. Their journey wasn't one of fairy tale heroism. It was survival. A mother and son trying to stay afloat in a storm of illness, poverty, and addiction. It was love and chaos existing side by side. It was life in its truest form. But here's where things get strange. Over the years, whispers and theories have begun to swirl, some so wild that they almost sound like urban legends. A few people who knew Rusty near the end of her life claimed she hinted that there were other things she hadn't said publicly. Some believe she thought the real story of Rocky's condition went deeper, that his disease might not have been exactly what the doctors said it was. One rumor suggests she became convinced that Rocky's bone disorder wasn't purely genetic, but possibly triggered by an experimental medication she'd been prescribed during her pregnancy in the late 1960s. The drug, she allegedly said, had been quietly pulled from the market years later. Was this a mother's guilt talking, or did she truly believe her son's fate had been decided in a lab, not by nature? Then there's the theory that Hollywood itself had something to hide. Some fans insist that Rusty's original interviews were edited, her more controversial statements cut to protect the film's legacy. They say her later truth-telling wasn't a sudden change of heart. It was her trying to undo years of careful public manipulation. One journalist even claimed that Universal Studios executives had warned Rusty, back in the 1980s, not to contradict the heroic mother image, fearing it would ruin the film's emotional core. Whether that's true or not, it adds another layer to an already tangled story. And then there's the strangest theory of all, the idea that Rocky Dennis himself might have left behind notes or recordings that contradicted the movie's narrative. Some claim these were destroyed. Others say they're still out there somewhere, hidden in storage or kept by a family friend. Could those writings reveal a different side of his life? One filled with anger, defiance, and a more complex view of his mother's choices? No one knows for sure, but the mystery continues to haunt those who dig too deep. At the heart of all this lies one haunting question. What is the true nature of a legacy? Is it the inspirational myth that lifts millions, even if it's built on half-truths? Or is it the unfiltered reality that exposes the cracks in the story, showing the raw pain underneath? Rusty's confession forced people to confront that divide. On one side, we have Mask, a movie that gave hope to countless viewers and turned Rocky into a global symbol of courage. On the other, we have the real-life story, a gritty, heartbreaking account of a family fighting against impossible odds. In a way, Rocky Dennis now lives two parallel lives. The cinematic version, frozen in time, smiling bravely through the pain. And the real Rocky, remembered by those who knew him, a boy who laughed, who swore, who got angry, and who dreamed of living an ordinary life. The Hollywood myth may have given him wings, but the truth gave him roots. Which story will you remember? The one that inspired the world, or the one that was true? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.